Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflare. Hope you're all doing very well today, and we are going to play some more rock for you on this channel. And we are on the same list that we played last time out, the same list we did the post-ban deck tech update on. There is one change, and we'll talk about that momentarily, but first, let us say thank you and welcome aboard to our two newest Patreon supporters. We have Kyle Peterson, who is a member of the Unearth tier, and we have Raja Burrows, who is a confidant. My friends, thank you so much for supporting this content. To all Patreon supporters, I love you guys, could not do it without you. Means the very world to me, so thanks again, guys, and welcome. Now, what are we doing as far as changing the list? Well, as mentioned, merely one change, and that would be Liliana's Triumph. So, Triumph has been in and out of my deck. I feel it does go a little bit underrated by the community. That said, let's not overrate it either. I think the floor on it is low enough, and it's not like the ceiling is amazingly high. It's high it's kind of high in two different ways. Number one, if it's your only out to a Suited Up Bogle or a Geist of Saint Traft or something like that, then yes, it is the very best tool for the job. Even potentially better than a Liliana Edict if Leyline of Sanctity is involved. The other way this has a high ceiling is, of course, the 2-for-1 mode, if you do control Liliana Planeswalker. So the ceiling is definitely acceptably high in a few ways, but I think most of the time this is like a solid, dependable, middle-of-the-road card that can make up numbers in a lot of matchups. But, you know, it is definitely a lot poorer in a lot more situations than even something like Deathmark might be, or Cast Down, you know? So I understand people not playing it, but I can't help but feel that it is a little bit underrated. So in an effort to just lower the curve a tad, to just bring a little bit more of interaction to the table as well, we have replaced our sideboard Tireless Tracker with Liliana's Triumph. We do have a lot of ways to grind baked into the deck already, and of course Triumph does have that 2-for-1 potential, so it's not like we're totally abandoning a value-oriented plan, but very minor tweak. Shout out to very thorough and frequent commentator on the channel, Mike Kingsley, who I do know is a fan of Triumph and whose conversations were in my mind as I made this change. So anyway, other than that one change, you're looking at 74 of the 75 the same. Now, it's been a while since we've done a replay on this channel. It's all been live recorded stuff lately, but I do know that a lot of people love the replays, so we're going to run this league back for you in replay form, starting right now. Let's get into it. Let's rock. Well, it's round one, game one, and we've got a fine hand. It's a functional keep. Little awkward that we don't have the third land, little awkward that our onboard interaction is Assassin's Trophy, but this is definitely a keep. And we do hit the third land right away, so good times, and I think when in doubt you should play Swamp out over Urborg just in case this fixes their mana a bit, right? So we'll lead on Swamp, we'll lead on Inquisition, and the opponent having kept 7 as well and gone turn 1 Blood Crypt pass, well, we do see that it is a mirror match of sorts. It feels less like a mirror these days, though, than it used to, right? Mainly because of this card, mainly because of the Wrenn and 6. So they've got a couple 2-for-1s in hand already. They've got the Wrenn, they've got the K command. This is, right out of the gates, a pretty tough call. I don't think we're supposed to take the Goyfs, because if we plan to ignore them, we can trophy one, edict the other, and yes, maybe they can buy one back at some point with the K command, but we're supposed to be stripping away 2-for-1s, right? Not just efficient beaters. So it's between said K command and the Wrenn and 6. Now, Wrenn and 6 is definitely a very, very strong card, and K command is going to line up pretty well against us. It's almost a guaranteed 2-for-1 no matter what. Any way things are going to go, it's going to get us somehow. But here's my thinking. In theory, depending on how we sequence, Courser and potentially even Scooze can outside the shock mode of K command, so maybe the 2-for-1 will not be backbreaking. Therefore, between that and between the prospect of facing down the Peatland plus Wrenn and 6 loop, I think we just take the Wrenn and 6. Even though they didn't have a fetch land right away to get immediate value, I still don't mind that play at all. So opponent, of course, will go Tarmogoyf, and it's back to us, and we are continuing to make land drops, so fair enough. what I'm going to do here is pass and decide whether or not to trophy the Goyf based on how big it is. If it's only a 2-3, I think it's going to be correct to just take the hit rather than give them their ramp that they're going to get off of trophy during main phase. And maybe if they don't play the other Tarmogoyf, maybe they're playing around Pulse or something, we can just do nothing this turn and then play a Liliana, right? So those are the reasons to take the hit, and indeed we're only getting hit for 2, no big deal. And the opponent will tap. Interestingly, they will tap Nurturing Peatland for Tarmogoyf, which means they probably have either Fatal Push or Lightning Bolt. But they do, in any case, run out the other Tarmogoyf here. I guess it means Lightning Bolt, actually, because they could have still left up Push this way, right? But in any case, we're going to give them another land anyway, so it's a little bit redundant, and we will go ahead and trophy. We're going to go on the Edict plan. We trophy one, we Edict the other, and then, you know, they've got the K command and all that, but we're going to run out the Liliana. Now, I think I actually probably played the wrong land here. I just kind of, at the time, I was thinking of that sequencing and, like, taking actions and saying, yep, we've got our sequencing confirmed, let's just run out the Liliana. But really, I should have fetched and shocked with the Catacombs just to give us the option to go Courser into land next turn if we wanted to. But in any case, the opponent is going to hit us with a discard mode and shock the Liliana, and I think we've got to pitch the Plague Engineer there. So Plagueman does not hose all that much out of Jund. You know, they might not be on Dark Confidant or on Hexdrinker, or on Seasoned Pyromancer, so it might not outright kill anything. Now, a Death Touch creature is still fine, but that's mostly for trading off with Goyf, and we've already seen 2 of them, so I'm going to keep the more advantage-oriented pieces, and we do kind of need that 4th land to make Scooz and Courser good, to make the former good and the latter playable, really. So we're going to run out the Scooz first, even though we risk the Lightning Bolt, because, you know, we're unlikely to be able to get around that anyway. They have a lot of other kill spells for the Ooze, and I'm going to try to exhaust their removal and then take over the game with hopefully the card advantage of Courser. That's the plan, but we'll see how it goes. The opponent will deploy a Black Cleave Cliffs, and then they sure do have more removal. It's Liliana, which would have taken care of Courser anyway, so we'll just eat a Goyf, gain a life, and bye-bye Ooze. Feels bad, man. Feels bad. But we do draw Abrupt Decay, which is actually pretty nice. So, Courser time, and then we were all ready to go on the Nurturing Peatland plan. And, you know, that was actually still an option, because if we did that, we could have gone Peatland, and yes, we wouldn't have gotten the quote-unquote free card off the top. But then what we could have done is had only 1 card left in hand. If and when their Liliana ticks up, we could decay her in response. So we're either providing them with card disadvantage that way, or we're providing ourselves with card advantage the sequence we took. I think it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but an interesting decision point. But in any case, we get to get that free play off the top. And then because we have sequenced this way, we are priced into main phasing the decay, which I think is fine. I think is, again, 6 one, half dozen of the other. Let's shrink this. That's a bit annoying. And the opponent will begin by cracking their own Peatland in search of more action. And they find another Lily. So obviously that's really brutal. Our whole plan here was to kind of trade off until we could stick an advantage engine, and then they just rip another Lily seemingly off the top. So pretty tough stuff, but we've got a Peatland of our own to crack. Let's see if our crack is as good. It is not as good, but it could be potentially reasonable. Dark Confidant, you know, so the opponent cannot kill it with what we know of, but they do have that Lightning Bolt in hand. We kind of read that earlier. Maybe we were correct, maybe we weren't, but in either case, they did have it now. So pretty annoying. We get the Blooming Marsh stripped out of our hand, and then we rip another Blooming Marsh. So this is the time when we really needed to rip something good. And instead it was simply the Marsh. So back to the opponent. And with 1 unknown in hand, the opponent will have a Bloodbraid Elf play. So pretty scary. Fortunately, they do cascade into one of their few dead cards, which would be Thoughtseize. But, you know, at this stage, even the 3-2 is a bit scary. just because we have the Liliana already to deal with. And we draw yet another land, so the flood is real. Notably, the Liliana has not ticked up, which is even scarier. You just know they've got something great in hand, so the opponent is extremely far ahead. And they're continuing to hold their cards, they're continuing to not tick Liliana up. So, obviously, that could work to our advantage in a couple different ways. We draw Tireless Tracker. Okay, that's a reasonable one. Feels bad that they were able to strip away our lands before we found her, right? But we do have this Field of Ruin active, so the opponent will end-step bolt the tracker, so of course in response we get to activate, we get to make a clue. Cracking the clue does not save tracker though, so we won't crack it yet. This plays better, of course, around Liliana, as well as targeted discard. And it's back to the opponent, and they have found yet another Bloodbraid Elf. And this one cascades into Lightning Bolt, so obviously that's pretty good. They're going to go ahead and swing, and they are going to put us right to 1. End step, we untap. End step, we crack the clue, draw the trophy. We untap, we draw Liliana. So hey, you know what? We are not technically dead. We're not technically dead, because we get to Edict, and then we've got to trophy the other Bloodbraid Elf, but hey, we're forcing them to find still more action off the top. And the opponent has found their third Bloodbraid Elf of the top deck portion of the game, which is just one too many for us to possibly beat. So that was a savage beating at the hands of Jund. Look, the early game turns, they were fine. We were able to take away the Renin 6 on turn 1. Being on the draw, that was very clutch. And then both players had some good value out of Liliana's of the Veil. We did a lot of one-for-one trading. Where the tide started turning is when they found the second Liliana after we played our last permanent, which was Courser. That was bad enough, but then, of course, we proceeded to flood. The opponent proceeded to rip Bloodbraid Elves. What are you going to do? So, usually Renin 6 is the card that makes the Jund matchup feel really lopsided, but in this case it was just slightly better progression followed by a bunch of Bloodbraid Elves. So that will certainly do it too. So that's pretty tough game, but let's take a look at the sideboard, see what to do. Alright, my friends, so here's my sideboarding plan in the brave new world of Renin 6 Jund. I still like to move away somewhat from discard, but I do feel we need at least a couple discard spells in, and I tend to leave in a little bit fewer on the play. So this is for the play. We're going to take out 4 discard spells, leaving Thoughtseizes in, just because they can hit Bloodbraid Elf, they can hit other curve-topping sideboard cards. Collective Brutality also goes, and we want to shave 1 land, and the correct land to shave here is Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. And coming in, we have our own curve-topping value in the form of Nissa. We have Nihil Spellbomb, which I actually rate pretty highly against Jund these days between the increased presence of K-Command and the, of course, Renin 6, plus generally being a serviceable card in BGX mirrors anyway. I like Spellbomb quite fine. 3 copies of Plague Man. As mentioned, it's not as good against Jund as it is against most other mid-range decks, but it's still a threat. We want threats and answers. It's got Death Touch. It's got occasional pretty nice upsides with the -1/-1. And I do like Liliana's Triumph as just another answer with the 2-for-1 potential. So here's how we sided. If we do manage to take them to Game 3, we'll be on the draw, in which case I'm going to bring in 1 fewer Plague Man and leave 1 more discard spell in, this time leaving in an Inquisition, because 3 Thoughtseizes might be a little bit too painful. That's how I side against Jund. Let's go to Game 2. Alright, so our Game 2 hand, totally fine. It's not the most impressive, but it's 3 lands, 4 spells. It's exactly where we want to be. We've got a curve. It's definitely a keep. Double Scoos, yeah, could be a little bit awkward, but it's not one we throw back, that is for sure. So, we do hit a 4th land, and I think we are just running out Scoos here for sure. This is potentially going to pressure them, provide too much pressure on the board for them to deploy a Renin 6. Instead, they will deploy Barrenmoor, they will bolt Scoos, and we draw Hexdrinker. Okay, so let's take a moment to think about what we should do here. There's definitely a few really interesting options. We could, if we wanted to be mana efficient, and we also wanted to aggressively disrupt their mana, we could go Field into Forest for Hexdrinker, or we could go Field into Swamp and hold up Fatal Push. Alternatively, we could be just mana efficient, just play a Plague Engineer, naming something blind. That could work too. I do think we want to, though, slow roll the Hexdrinker. I also think we want to kind of incentivize the opponent, if they're sitting on a Liliana, to play it out. So Scavenging Ooze is kind of the happy medium between these things. Scavenging Ooze, yes, it cannot survive another Lightning Bolt, but they might only be on 3. They've already seen 1. And this will bait out a Liliana, but sure enough, they have another Lightning Bolt, so that's pretty annoying, but I still think Scavenging Ooze is a fine play there. We do get a little value off of it before it bites the dust, unlike something like Plague Man. So the opponent will play a Tarmogoyf and they will pass. Now, our whole plan with that sequencing there was to say, okay, no matter what happens, we get to go Hexdrinker, make it a level 3, 4/4 pro instance this turn. That is still true, we could still do that, but we are still wary of the Liliana Edict. It is very possible that the opponent just thought it was a better play to go Bolt Goyf, more proactive, than to play a Liliana, especially if the rest of their hand is good. So with that in mind, we still are leaning a lot on the Hexdrinker, and we also now have another way to win the game in the form of Kalitas. Like, if they don't have an answer to the Kalitas, then, Fatal Push and Plague Engineer could become excellent. So instead of going on the Hexdrinker plan, which was kind of our plan the whole time, we do play Kalitas, and the opponent does have an answer, but it's Trophy. So look, this just basically proves to us that they do not have a Liliana in hand, right? There's no way they would fail to Edict Kalitas. So we have the green light for Hexdrinker, no Liliana in the opponent's hand. We get a Liliana of our own. Interesting draw, good draw, but definitely now is our window for Hexdrinker. We've already seen 2 bolts. We just have to hope they don't have a third or a push here, and we're just going to put levels on. And we make it to level 3 all the way. Awesome. Might as well put it on level 4. We're not doing anything else with that mana. And so now we're on the Hexdrinker plan, and this is exactly where we want to be. This is what our hand was kind of leading up to. And we know they don't have a Liliana, but they do have a Bloodbraid Elf, which cascades into a Liliana. Absolutely backbreakingly good. And of course, they will Edict away Hexdrinker. They will hit us for 3. And we draw another Liliana of the Veil. Again, very good card, but just so awkward right now because we have we're one shy of having a nice double spell turn here to really start putting a little pressure onto their Liliana. So instead, all we can do is Edict and pass. We could have ticked up 2, but I don't think that's correct. The opponent will do the ticking up for us. Decided we would be better served by having some kind of a frontline presence next turn with the Plague Engineer. Maybe perhaps forcing the opponent to cash in their own Liliana. Maybe ours survives if they don't have a threat. It's all unlikely, but in a bad situation, we take the less bad option, which I believe that was. And the opponent has Ashiok. We have Ashiok on our sideboard. I didn't bring it in. I don't think Ashiok is good in BGX mirrors. Yes, it can shut off fetches. Yes, it can get a little value against opposing graveyards. But to me, you need to see a third reason. You need to see something extra. You need to see some extra search dependence like the Stoneforge Mystic plan. If your opponent's on Abzan and they're using their graveyard and they're fetching and they're tutoring with Stoneforge Mystic, sure, Ashiok seems fine. If your opponent is on a Traverse build where they are very graveyard dependent, then sure, Ashiok seems fine. But in these traditional BGX mirrors like Rock versus Jund, I don't think Ashiok, is good. It just is kind of a dead card if you ignore those little incidental values. Like right now, we're not dependent on our graveyard in any way. Even if we draw a Tarmogoyf, we have the opponent's graveyard to grow it, and they're just as likely to have the Goyf as we are, right? And it's not hosing a fetch right now, so this is kind of just a dead card. That's a little bit of a rant, but there we go. That's my opinion on Ashiok in the matchup anyway. And I also don't really like blind milling with Ashiok here personally. But if they just want to do it like a one-shot thing to get rid of our graveyard in case we are on something where that matters, fair enough. Really interesting call as to what to blind name with the Plague Ban. I don't read them for Hexdrinker, I don't read them for Elementals via Pyromancer, and I don't read them for Dark Confidant, so I just named Lurgoyf. It's the one thing that we do know is in their deck, right? And if we draw a Goyf of our own, it could become a relevant way to break the mirror. But then we get an asymmetrical tick-up of Lily, so that's at least something. And, another interesting thing. We could have fielded the Raging Ravine and had a really mana-efficient turn, taken away their creature land, fixed our own mana a little bit, but they only had Barrenmoor untapped. That would have given them potentially Decay or Trophy or even Revolt for Fatal Push last turn, right? So that's why we didn't do that. The opponent has Kalitas, a little bit terrifying. The opponent will Edict us. It's a very nice combination, as we well know. Getting the zombie to protect Kalitas from their Return Edict. And then, again, with the milling of Ashiok, I don't really see that as correct, but let me know if you disagree, my friends. That could be just something that's fine to do. But notably, what it does do is put Ashiok to 3. So here's my plan. Yes, we could take up and get the last card out of their hand, but for all we know, there's nothing. I think we need to deal with what's on the board. I think we need to kill Kalitas now, if at all humanly possible. So, therefore, we Edict. They, of course, cash in the zombie. And then the opponent seems to value Ashiok highly enough to have brought it in and to be actively using it. So we are going to try to bait them into blocking with Kalitas, otherwise Treetop will finish off Ashiok. Sure enough, they take the block, and maybe you just take your guaranteed value of the zombie plus the kill plus the life. I'm not saying that's the wrong play, but it is the play we were hoping they would make because this is our only way we can get rid of Kalitas. So look, even when Plague Man has no apparent great use cases, he still manages to take down one of their best cards. But the opponent just rips Lightning Bolt, and then their last card is Wrenn and 6. So, needless to say, we are extraordinarily far behind, despite our best efforts to claw back into this one. Opponent's going to keep milling us, and we draw Dark Confidant. At this point, we could either sandbag it and hope to draw Pulse or another catch-all removal for Wrenn and 6, then play the Dark Confidant, and hope that is good enough. I instead chose to just run it out and to try to extend the game. I don't think it's likely that Dark Confidant runs away with the game. I think it is likelier that we can top deck something like maybe a Nissa that can run away with the game, so therefore I'm just playing the Bob to extend the game, to just have them tick down instead of tick up for one turn. It's pretty miserable, but they kind of had the right things in the right spots as far as how they line up against our stuff, that is for sure. Opponent finds a Scavenging Ooze off the top. The value just keeps on coming for them. We're getting smacked by the zombie. And then it's back to us, and we top deck a Blooming Marsh, and that's enough for me. So, yeah, what can you say? We got absolutely pasted here by Jund. Feels really, really bad that something that used to be a pretty 50-50 mirror is now rather lopsided. Now, I don't believe the matchup is anywhere near as lopsided as it looked here. Like, we were just very punished at various different turns. The opponent's curve outs were very oppressive relative to what we were up to. We never really got going. We never really stuck a permanent that they didn't immediately answer, right? So it certainly doesn't always go like this. My record against Jund is still fine, honestly, overall, but boy, when it's bad, it is bad, and we saw that here. So hey, at least we lost to a fellow BGXer, right? We got that going for us, but right out of the gates, we get absolutely wrecked by Jund, so that's all right. We got to keep our chin up. We got to go on to round 2 and try to get a little bit of more love from the deck next time. And we have won the die roll here in round 2, my friends. We'll keep 7, as will the opponent. It's a lands and spells hand. You can't really say that much more for it. It's definitely a little threat dense for our tastes, but it could pan out. We'll see. We draw Thoughtseize. Interesting draw. So right away, we have a tough decision against a Wooded Foothills deck. What are we against? Is it Burn? Is it Scapeshift? Who knows? Either way, I do think that we are pretty priced into the Thoughtseize here. And then we'll find out. So we see the opponent has blue-green and red mana, at least, if not more. Also rainbow mana via Ether Hub, and Rogue Refiner alongside Through the Breach. So obviously this is a combo deck utilizing Through the Breach, but we see with Rogue Refiner and Ether Hub that there is the energy sub-theme. So we think we know what's up here, but in any case, kind of no matter what the opponent is up to, Rogue Refiner is the card to take, in my opinion, because it's going to clog up the board. It's their early play, It's a redraw, and they need to draw whatever they're trying to breach out. That's what they're needing to dig toward, right? Plus, we cannot take away the second through the breach, even if we take the first one away. So that's just the play. And then we run out our Savannah Lions and see how far it's going to get us. Opponent will go Steam Vents and pass, and we draw Fatal Push. All right, probably not the very best. So this turn, we could invest all of the mana into Hexdrinker, main phase, and then attack. But I think it's going to be definitely better in the long run to get a Tarmogoyf down this turn if we can. Therefore, we'll attack with the 2-1 first, and that'll get through. Then it's Goyf time, and we'll just put a level on Hexdrinker. So we're obviously trying to race them as hard as we can. Our clock is decent. It's definitely okay. Opponent's got another 3-drop, and it's another Rogue Refiner. It's the Curse of Thoughtseize when they draw what you've taken away, right? So we definitely kind of wanted to hit a draw just like this one, which is Verdant Catacombs. This is going to let us do a little bit of everything. Now, it's actually really interesting. Lots of interesting decisions here early in this game. We could finally get our Liliana down, and we can Edict, and then we can tick up and start eating away at the hand. The problem is, we know they have a redundant Through the Breach to pitch. We know they probably have either action that doesn't line up or excess lands in hand. In other words, just by ticking up Liliana at this stage of the game, we're just a little too late to start doing it, and their hand's a little too full. We're not going to get the combo out of their hand by ticking up. We're just simply not. That's just simply not realistic. So instead, we are going to get Revolt to push, and then we put Hexy all the way up to a 4-4. So now race mode is well and truly activated. We go ahead and smash him for 8, and the opponent is dead on board because we've got Treetop Village. So definitely feels all right to me. And then the opponent will go Ancient Stirrings, finding the combo piece, finding what they're trying to breach out, which is Emrakul, the Eon's Torn. So definitely a little bit scary, but again, they are dead on board. They have to have also drawn some way of interacting to stay alive. Now, I actually, once again, think it's a really interesting call here. There's lots of impactful decisions that have been made in a very short time here in this game. But what can we do? So we have 3 different ways of getting to lethal this turn. We can just put all the levels on Hexdrinker. That's got protection from everything, and then we hit them for 10. Or we can activate Treetop Village, and we can, I guess, put a level on Hexdrinker if we want to, and then we're going to hit them for 11. Notably, both of those are going to be good against a possible Remand. I don't know at this point if the deck is on Remand, but that's definitely something to keep in mind, or Permission in general, right? Now, the other thing we can do is just attack and see what they've got, and if they have some other way of staying alive, then maybe Collective Brutality is the way to finish them off. But the way I see it, it's like, look, there's basically no way they can stay alive without interacting with the board, and I don't think, like, if they can interact with Tarmogoyf, then putting the levels on Hexdrinker doesn't really accomplish anything, and Hexdrinker plus Treetop Village is not lethal anyway. Therefore, I said, look, I think Collective Brutality is just kind of as good of a finisher as anything else, and maybe if something really weird happens, it also has additional upsides. So let's just attack. We can also, finally, we can play around Remand with Brutality simply by recasting it, right? So I said, let's just attack. Let's just put him down to 1, if we can. However, the opponent has an energy payoff interactive card, Harness Lightning. Certainly not a modern staple or anything, but yeah, the opponent gets to make some energy, and then they get to use it to kill the Tarmogoyf. Feels pretty rough. So, again, nothing else we could have done plays around this. Nothing we could have done plays around this, so we are just kind of dead, but we will cast a Collective Brutality to see what is in their hand, and it's just, again, a lot of nothing. 2 through the breaches, which we can only take 1 of, and the Emrakul, and we are dead once they breach it out, because we're at exactly 15 life, and of course our whole board is annihilated, so even if we weren't dead, I doubt we would have made it. But man, oh man, starting to feel like one of those leagues right out of the gate, where it's like, look, we keep kind of a whatever hand, it turns out it kind of shapes up decently as a way to race a deck like this. Our Tarmogoyf got big really quickly. We had some really good windows to level up Hexdrinker efficiently. We had a few different ways to leverage our way to a turn 5 kill, but they all were dependent on the opponent not having a kill spell. The opponent had a kill spell, and their Stirrings found the combo piece the turn before, and they just had exactly enough lands. We were at exactly low enough life to make it all happen, and they had, of course, the redundancy of double through the breach. So again, we're like, oh boy, this has been a tough league so far. Really, really punished with our first 3 games, but we gotta keep the morale high. That's how we get good results, is we keep the morale high. We just try to keep taking the best lines we can manage, and to that end, let's take a look at the sideboard. Alright, my friends, so we are against Marvel Breach, or, it's an Aetherworks Marvel deck. We know that from the Energy sub-theme, and of course it's a Through the Breach deck, so basically it's got a lot of redundancy with being able to combo off, because they've got the Energy sub-theme to accrue value and to do some interesting interacting along the way, and then they use that energy for some free casts off of Aetherworks Marvel, as well as, of course, just the good old-fashioned Through the Breach for stuff like Emrakul. So, definitely an unusual deck. I'm sure builds vary, but I can only side against my limited knowledge of the archetype and what we saw. So, of course, this might be up for debate to some degree, but let me know what you think. But here's what I did. Think it's at least reasonable. So, Surgical, classic inclusion against a combo deck, not much more to say there. Fulminator Mage, they do definitely need to hit a lot of land drops to successfully breach. I think this is a totally reasonable axis on which to attack the deck. Collective Brutality, of course, more hand disruption, and Liliana's Triumph, hand disruption, and a way to remove value creatures like Rogue Refiner, and even a way to blow out a breached Emrakul if we've got it at the right time. So that's for sure a good inclusion here. And in terms of what comes out, it's a little bit less clear, but here's what I was thinking. So, leaving in trophies feels a little bad because we are aggressively attacking their land base, but I do think we need a good amount of ways to kill Aetherworks Marvel, right? So, between Trophy and Pulse, we do have access to that. And I did cut Abrupt Decay. They do have some targets for it, but ultimately we don't want to be that reactive, and if we are priced into leaving in Trophy and Pulse, then Decay is what's got to make way. Similar story with Push. I do know that these lists sometimes play Birds of Paradise and other small creatures, but we do know at least they're on Rogue Refiner, so I like hedging away down to 2. We could maybe go up or down for game 3 depending on what we see, but we'll cut a couple more pieces of spot removal, and then we're cutting 2 of our worst threats in terms of providing an actual clock, which would be the one of Courser and the one of main deck Plague Man. I think in this matchup, Skooz just as a 2-drop bearer with upside and the ability to grow. Tireless Tracker, these things are a little bit more likely to get us over the line when we have to race, and might be a little bit more resilient in some ways to their interaction as well. So that is how I sideboarded. Let's check out game 2. Alright, my friends, well, will this hand do it for us? I don't know. It doesn't have that much disruption, but we do have a pretty good land destruction plan. I have no idea how many basics a deck like that is likely to play, but Fields of Ruin plus Fulminator Mage, we could really attack that angle. We do have the Treetop Village as an additional clock. The hand functions, I'm inclined to keep it. It's awkward that it doesn't have double black despite having 5 lands naturally, right? But they can't really combo off with, at least with Through the Breach, until they have 5 mana on the field, so hopefully we won't need to Fulminator on turn 3, especially on the play. We draw Hexdrinker. Just would have been nice to deploy this last turn, but I believe it to be our best play now. So we'll run it out. Just getting as proactive as possible, going in Savannah Lions mode, trying to race, and the opponent will just main phase a Harnessed Lightning. So see you later, Hexdrinker. And we draw an Abrupt Decay. Well, I guess I did leave 1 in. I think with my recommended sideboarding, I was just saying to cut 2. I think I hedged. I think I left 1 in. And then I'll tell you once we see what we've seen, what we're going to see, excuse me. And that prompted me to cut the final Decay. But what I showed you in any case is my preferred recommended sideboarding for this matchup. Opponent goes Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot. This is one of those uncommonly seen, just kind of this deck specific, or at least energy sub-theme specific value pieces, and it's actually an incredibly good one, especially against a deck like ours. It's a 2-mana ETB, gain 3, get 3 energy counters, and then you can sacrifice it to do the same stuff. So definitely a innocuous looking card, but one that does serve as something of an engine and a way to extend the game for their deck. Instead, we will eat Hexdrinker, and we have drawn Inquisition. So what to do, what to do? Well, now is a fine time to take them off of this waterlogged grove to begin our land destruction plan, and fix our own mana, finally getting double black. And now is also a fine time to cast an Inquisition, so let's do that. We get another Puzzle Knot out of their hand, and we see they have a Magmatic Sinkhole, which is yet more interaction. That's a little tough, and Emrakul as well as Ulamog. So much like they have a few different ways to combo off, they also appear to have a few different payoffs. So, of course, we can only take the Puzzle Knot, and then we're just going to go ahead and eat something out of their graveyard, just to make their Magmatic Sinkhole a little bit worse, even though they'll still be able to cast it. And I chose the Canopy land just in case they have a way to recur lands. You just never know with rogue decks like this what they're going to be on. So it's worth thinking about even corner case decisions like that. But the opponent, once again, just kind of main phasing their effects. Sinkhole will get us. And we are kind of not up to all that much in terms of the clock. So, of course, we could fire up the treetop, we could start getting busy, but at this point, I'm like, I think we need to attack their resources more aggressively. Like, we're already kind of committed to this plan. We haven't drawn anything to make us deviate from that, like a Tarmogoyf or something. So instead of that, we're just going to spend our turn fielding and then stone raining with Fulminator Mage. So in any case, we've set them back by at least one land, and maybe more, depending on how many basics are in their deck, at least in the long run, right? They did play this island and the Sinkhole, so they have one unknown in hand plus the 2 big goons. We'll Thoughtseize to see what's up in case they have yet another kill spell. We can clear the way for our Treetop Village. Opponent will remand us, so remand is in the deck, good to know. Thoughtseize once again, and we see 2 Ulamogs. Emrakul is the better take anyway, and especially with the redundancy of Ulamog, that's even more clearly the take, so we just... Finally, on turn 6, we've begun clocking them. We smack them with the Treetop Village. Will it be enough? Doesn't seem likely, but we're going to give it our best shot. So we draw a Hissing Quagmire. That's another clock, technically. It's definitely an underwhelming one, but this Treetop is putting in some work. Another 3 to them, and then we just deploy the Quagmire and pass. We could decay this on our, kind of forcing this on our own terms. Doesn't seem like it accomplishes all that much, so instead we'll just hold up Decay in case they find another Rogue Refiner, basically. And in any case, the opponent will end step it, so sure. Back to the opponent, and they do hit land drop number 5, so we are dead to a Through the Breach, but they do not have it. Back to us. I chose to leave that fetch land uncracked in case we drew Fatal Push later, and in case we drew another land now, so we could leave up Revolt, or we could leave up a land for Tireless Tracker and still fire up the creature lands this turn. But since we didn't hit another land, we are priced into fetching anyway, and then we're just hoping they don't have interaction and hoping they don't have Through the Breach. So we're going to go ahead and smack them for 5, and hey, they're down to 10. They also did fetch to thin out the deck, I guess, but it interestingly does mean they're dead in 2 hits. And still no Through the Breach, so back to us, and we drew our second Fatal Push of the 2 we left in, so these reactive cards are looking mighty poor, but hey, we've got the Treetop Village, we've got the Hissing Quagmire, we hit the opponent, and the opponent draws again and they scoop it up, so I believe that was a bit of a punt from the opponent to have fetched, because of course, they don't need specific mana, they already have that mountain, they have the Aether Hub, they don't need specific mana to breach, right? So they definitely shortened the clock by 1 turn by fetching, and that proved to be enough. Never would have imagined it. We just literally got over the line with creature land beats only, plus 1 or 2 points of life loss from fetching. But yeah, definitely interesting. So we still didn't see Aetherworks Marvel, but we did see Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, and we did see Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. So now I'm more inclined, like I was started to say earlier, I believe what I initially did was I played 1 Decay and 2 Trophy, because I was like, I don't want to run too many trophies. We're on the Fulminator plan. That's counterproductive. But now I am certain that they are on that energy payoff in addition to the energy sub-theme. Having multiple payoffs for being able to free cast or to breach is more evidence of that. Therefore, for Game 3, I believe we sided out the final Decay for another trophy. Still leaving in the 2 Fatal Push, even though they were awkward draws here. Again, they still might be on birds. They still kill Rogue Refiner. I think it's still fine to keep a couple. So anyway, we got a little bit lucky to get there in Game 2. Opponent bricked for a few turns, but hey, we'll take it. Game 3, onward. So the combo deck's keeping 7 all 3 games. You hate to see it. You hate to see it. Well, do we keep our 7? You know, it's a pretty average 7, but I believe that we do. Once again, from what I know, the archetype does play bird some of the time, so having the turn 1 push is pretty sweet. They don't have the turn 1 bird, though, so back to us, and Tracker is potentially a good draw. We'll see how it all shapes up, of course, but we do have some decent early interaction. It's okay. It's okay. The opponent will go Steam Vents, and they will pass back, so interesting decision point. We just drew another land, so nothing great there, but do we Brutality to clear the way for the Goyf, or do we simply play the Goyf and force them to have interaction? Interesting call. I chose to run out the Goyf because, number one, they might not have interaction, and if they don't, well, the Goyf clocking, the sooner the better, right? And even if they do and we lead on Brutality, we may be priced into taking away Through the Breach anyway with Brutality. I think we basically are if they have one. We're not going to try to race the Through the Breach on the draw with a lone Tarmogoyf. It's just not going to happen, right? So instead we run out the Goyf, and sure enough, Harness Lightning getting us all 3 games, killing Goyf, and then Hexy, and then Goyf again. Feels bad. We continue to flood like absolute crazy, and the hand is doing absolutely nothing besides, unless we can get Tireless Tracker online. So for that reason, and because I suppose it's possible that the opponent could go like Simian Guide or some other way of ramping and then Through the Breach us next turn, we're going to go Brutality this turn and Tracker next turn, making sure we get at least a clue off of her before she potentially gets killed. We don't see a Through the Breach, but we do see a Magmatic Sinkhole, so we are very rewarded for not trying to run out the Tracker ahead of schedule. All that said, it's still going to be a very slow clock, but that's kind of where we're at. Opponent ripped an Attune with Ether for turn, and they go get a Forest, and they get a little bit of energy in their lives. We rip an Inquisition, which is a dead draw, of course. So we just go Tracker, make a clue, hold up, Fatal Push. It's at least a dead draw for the moment. Who knows what the future may hold. Opponent drew Waterlogged Grove for turn, they'll play it, they'll crack it, and they'll pass. We draw Fulminator Mage. Alright, interesting draw. So what do we do? Well, first things first, of course, get our clue value. And then let's move to attacks, see if they've got anything to say about this here. I think the plan here is to simply Fulminator and kind of time lock them with a Stone Rain effect. Especially because they've already Stone Rained themselves with the Waterlogged Grove. That's what makes that really appealing. So we're going to crack a clue just because the clock is relevant, and if they are on Remand, which we have seen, it's not like holding up the mana allows us to recast a Remanded Fulminator. We only have 5 this turn, right? So we'll just get our damage in. We draw Dark Confidant. That could be good. And then it's Fulminator time. Fulminator will resolve, and we'll just go ahead and Stone Rain right away. I don't know what the correct land is to hit, but they have all the colors they need, right? They're a teamer deck, so we might as well just hit the Rainbow land. But it doesn't matter as far as I can tell. Back to the opponent, they play the Forest that we knew about, and they will play the card I've been talking about this whole time. We're finally seeing it. Aetherworks Marvel. So this is their payoff for playing the energy sub-theme and a way to more consistently combo off rather than just needing to find Through the Breach every game. So whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get an energy counter. They've already got 3, just from doing Ether Hub and Attune with Ether and Harness Lightning type stuff. And then they can tap Marvel and pay 6 energy to look at the top 6, cast a card for free. So obviously they can get Emrakul's and Ulamogs out with that. A little bit scary, not gonna lie. So back to us. It is Tireless Tracker time because we're just looking for maybe a kill spell for Aetherworks Marvel, or maybe more interaction. We know that at least Thoughtseize is good, but we can cast that no problem. Also looking for a fetch land. We don't find anything, so fair enough. We'll just play out a land, make a clue, and go for the Thoughtseize. And we see Through the Breach is in the opponent's hands, so obviously got to take that one away, no question about it. And then, rather than doing anything with Field of Ruin or cracking a clue just for a little more damage, I'd rather play the Confidant here. It plays better around spot removal. It's, of course, drawing us to more interaction, and he will help clock at this stage of the game. Plus, he helps us present lethal. We have Hissing Quagmire on the field, remember? So, we are presenting lethal with a cracked clue next turn. Opponents gotta draw something great this turn to stay in the game, and they draw Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, which is great. Gains them 3 life, and that's going to extend the clock. More importantly, it gives them the 6 energy they need to activate Aetherworks Marvel. That is exactly what they will do. We gotta hope they brick in this top 6, and they do the opposite of brick. They get Ulamog. So Ulamog is just going to come down as an indestructible 10/10 that exiles both of our creatures, punishes us for playing the Bob. Holy moly, could this league get any worse? Well, we're not out of it yet, my friends. Let's not give up hope just yet. We got clues to crack. We're cracking a clue. We've drawn Tarmogoyf. We've drawn Blooming Marsh. All right. Not the very best stuff. We're in desperation mode now. We dig, maybe looking for a trophy, like anything. Nothing. Not that trophy handles Ulamog, but Liliana's Triumph would. We don't have that. Instead, we draw Thoughtseize. Okay, so that's action, but this turn, I think we're definitely just going to play the Goyf instead. We're going to just try to start rebuilding our board, clock the opponent. We're going to take a hit this turn from Ulamog. We are still dead to Through the Breach, but instead they've drawn a land. Granted, I guess they needed the land before they can cast Breach, so that might be a good draw. In any case, Ulamog will attack us for 10 and mill us for 20. Seems pretty balanced. And then it is going to go back to us. And we find our savior. We find Liliana of the Veil. We definitely needed to find a card that said Liliana on it. Triumph would have done it too, but Veil was going to work just fine. So we get to Edict away Ulamog. We do have hope. And they get an energy counter off of it. Value plays, right? Then we'll Thoughtseize, and this was actually a minor punt, but a punt nevertheless, because we, of course, want to take Emrakul. That's the better take. But that means the Goyf is shrunken by 1. So should have, of course, done that after the attack. We could also have fielded first, but we have seen that they play at least 3 basics. I think we saw 4 last game, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like fielding that aggressively is going to Stone Rain them quite yet. So in any case, the opponent will cash in the Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot and note that they are 1 energy counter away from activating Marvel yet again. Really, really scary. And I guess that's the most important reason not to have activated Field, because that would, of course, give them their 6th energy counter. So definitely glad we did not decide to go on the Field of Ruin plan. Got to be very mindful of that against this deck. It's back to us. We draw Collective Brutality. All right, interesting. It could work, but I think we're just going to lead on Inquisition because it's a little more mana efficient. We'll see what they've got. We're kind of pricing ourselves out of attacking with Quagmire this turn probably, but I think that's all right. I think we want to just see what's in their hand, try to take away something that might be meaningful. We follow up with the Inquisition, and they just have a Remand into a Waterlogged Grove. So their hand is Ulamog, Grove. What do we do? Well, once again, we can't field, so we're just going to tick up, get a card out of their hand, and pitch one of our redundant Fatal Pushes. We have seen both of them, both post-side games, when they might have even gone so far as to side out their Rogue Refiners, right? Not ideal, but so we're just going to fire off the Brutality here to drain them for 2, because that means we are more likely to have lethal next turn, and that's really all we care about at this stage. Back to the opponent. They pitched the Ulamog, they kept the Waterlogged Grove, and they're going to crack it, getting, coincidentally, this is just yet another deck that these Canopy lands are great in, energy counter number 6. So here we go, my friends. We're crossing our fingers, hoping for a whiff or at least a semi-brick, and the opponent does kind of brick. It's a Rogue Refiner. It's a card. It gets them a draw, but they are just dead on board if they don't have anything else in hand, because Liliana's going to Edict. Goyf and Quagmire are going to get in for the win. So, wow, that was those were some unlikely wins. We won on turn 9, game 2, with purely manland beats, and we were set to win on turn 10 on the draw here, game 3, through 2 Aetherworks Marvel activations, one of which hit, the other one kind of whiffed, right? So, what a game, my friends. What an intense match. And also, the game 1, that was a lot quicker, but that was a really close one. That was a really interesting. The opponent pulled it out of nowhere, right? They pulled the win out of nowhere, so started to feel like the league was all going downhill, but we clawed our way to a victory here. Very interesting game against an archetype I never really see. I don't think it's a very common one. So good games, well played to the opponent. We're back on the board. We're 1-1 going into... So we're on the play once again, my friends, for round 3, and we've got a classic... interactive rich, 4 spells, 3 lands hand. Definitely a good keep in a blind game 1. We'll hope that our spot removal lines up, and we will begin with the Thoughtseize. And we see the opponent has mulliganed to 6, and this looks like the Devoted combo deck, Devoted Druid Vizier of Remedies combo. People are calling it Devoted Devastation for the card finale of Devastation. It's no longer Counters Company because Collected Company doesn't really see play in stock lists anymore. But notably, they only have 1 land, so this is a extremely interesting decision. Lots of valid things here. We could just be really safe and take the combo piece. I don't think that's correct because we've got all the spot removal, and we'll be able to disrupt the combo, I hope, unless they just keep drawing combo pieces, and like the one Thoughtseize that we didn't use ends up coming back to bite us. But that's not realistic, so we need to make an executive decision as to whether to take away the birds and leave all the value in their hand. If we do that, we are forcing them to draw lands. Exactly lands, because even if they draw more birds, we've got Fatal Push. So we are forcing them to draw exactly lands in a relatively, in a not land-rich deck. It's not like it's blue-white control, right? So the other thing we could do is just say, all right, we're going to give them the birds and we're going to take away something from the top end, probably Eternal Witness, maybe Kitchen Finks, but that probably prices us into spending next turn pushing. So looking for the upside of the free win, and also the secondary upside of just being able to play Tarmogoyf next turn instead of having to push, I did decide to take the birds. So we're forcing them to draw lands, we're getting to play our Goyf turn 2, and I think that's all pretty good stuff. Might as well fetch now to get the Goyf bigger, not strictly necessary, but sadly this has not paid off. The opponent has hit their second land right away, and they will deploy a Vizier. So, back to us, what do? We draw another basic land. Not ideal, is it? Not very ideal. We'll attack. Of course, they're not going to block here. We could push before damage to increase the clock by 1, but I would rather just hold up all of my effects and see if that makes them take a more suboptimal line than they otherwise would. But, so, operating on that same principle, we'll take the hit. Our life total is kind of low. It's not exactly free, but I think it's fine. But the opponent's not baited into going for, more combo setup. They're just going to play the Finks. So, sure enough, fair enough, we're going to Fatal Push. And then we could Trophy here for mana efficiency, but doesn't seem very good. Unfortunately, we draw Liliana of the Veil. It's a good draw, but it really punishes us for not trophying last turn. Because if we did, we could just Edict, and then we could smack them with the Goyf, and then they would have the Liliana problem to deal with. We'd have another trophy in hand, we'd play our 4th land. We can do none of that now, and that just shows you, it definitely was not strictly incorrect to fail to trophy the things. That is a 3-for-1 in their favor, right? And there are many other draws we could have had where we'd rather just keep the trophy around, especially because we want to save this for the combo, for breaking up the combo, right? But the draw of Liliana definitely changes all of that. So we're going to attack. We're going to offer the value block for them, and if they take it, we would have Edicted. Because they didn't, we're going to play the Liliana, we're just going to tick her up. Definitely, again, we've had to pivot game plans a couple times already, and it's only turn 4. This is the hazard of playing an interactive deck, right? You have to not only react to what your opponent's doing, but you have to be willing to change your own game plan on the fly. The good news, though, is that Liliana just attacking their resources is very good, and the opponent will hit her down with the Kitchen Finks, recognizing the power of that. Then they're going to play the Witness, buying back the Vizier. So the value train continues. We draw Fatal Push. Pretty good draw, but awkwardly timed, and of course we continue to be punished for not hitting that trophy because we have to pitch one now. We do get a Finale of Devastation out of their hand. That's definitely something. But we are now adopting a more defensive posture. We are kind of going to try to grind them out of the game on the back of this Lily. So, opponent plays the Vizier. Fair enough. Now, we were kind of hoping maybe that they would attack, knowing the synergy between Kitchen Finks and Vizier of Remedies. Finks would be kind of a free attack, maybe. Maybe they think the Witness is expendable. They send them both in to try to take the Liliana down, and we can push the Vizier, and we can block, and it'd be great. But they didn't go for it, so instead we will just Fatal Push on the end step here. And we could Trophy, too, so we don't get more cards that we have to take up to pitch, and therefore I'm going to. I went for the Witness. You can make an argument for Finks as well. Can't really see that one is strictly better than the other, but in any case, we draw more action. It is in the form of Hexdrinker, which is nice. Any playable card here is nice. We get to take up the Liliana. It's asymmetrical, and we get Carrion Feeder out of their hand. Interesting. So the last card is Eladamri's Call. And it's back to them, but they don't fire it off. They're going to untap and then main phase it. And they're going to get Vizier. So, then they'll play the Vizier. And then they'll pass. So Vizier just, in the all-in combo version, it's kind of a 2-1 do-nothing, unless it's killing you with a combo. But here, with the Kitchen Finks value plan, it's actually a real issue. So, as mentioned, there is the synergy between them. We draw another Liliana of the Veil. Again, with this little synergy, we can't really remove them, but we might as well edict them first, force them to edict their correct creature, and they, of course, do. So it gets to come back without any -1/-1 counters on it. They do get to gain 2 life, so maybe we shouldn't have just done that, but whatever. In any case, doesn't matter much. Either way, we were going to have a Liliana at 4. We get the Walking Ballista out of their hand. Very interesting. That's kind of cool that they drew what might be their only combo win condition here. That said, we are still kind of in a defensive posture because we are just going to try to grind them out and protect our Liliana. Opponent drew a land. We draw a Kalitas. Well, that's awkward. It's the literal only card in our deck that we can't cast. But that's alright. We're just going to go Hexdrinker mode. Thought about attacking. Decided, of course, not to. And then we'll just go pump it up, pass the turn. We could take up pitching Kalitas. That is an option to get toward ultimate threshold and then maybe have to alt splitting the lands and splitting Finks up from Vizier. That's an interesting option. I don't know, but we would have been punished for doing that because they drew another Vizier here, right? In any case, another very decision-rich match, my friends, and we draw a Scavenging Ooze, and that's, once again, it's awkward. We're choked on mana. The Liliana has been great, but at the same time has made our own sequencing less than optimal. All that said, we do finally have the Hexdrinker at level 8, so they cannot get infinite free blocks with the Finks. They can't even block it at all, so the Hexdrinker is putting them to the sword. The Goyf will continue protecting us, and now that we've drawn Scavenging Ooze and Kalitas Traitor of Ghet, I'm pretty fine to start working toward the ultimate. I think Kalitas' upside is high enough that we just keep him, but there's an argument for keeping Skooz as well, just because it can disrupt Finks. Shouldn't be material to the outcome of the game. They're probably either going to combo us out or not. Opponent will attack, and at this point, if they gain 2 more life 2 more times, they have extended the clock. So I'm just going to let them hit the Liliana. I think that's fine. We draw an Unearth. That actually rewards us for pitching Skooz rather than Kalitas. So while that was a debatable decision, it's actually going to work to our favor here a bit. And more importantly, though, again, these corner cases are not what the game is hinging on. It's just, will Hexdrinker get there before they top deck the combo? And it looks like it will. So we're going to put Lily back to 3. Kalitas is no longer quite needed. And the opponent has exactly 1 turn to top deck something good, and they top deck a fetch land, which, because of their tracker, is actually really, really nice. So they crack one clue, they go get Dryad Arbor, good to know that's in the deck, and then they found a Chord of Calling. So they're going to go Chord for Devoted Druid, which is all well and good, but it's summoning sick, and they also don't have a way to dig through the deck. So they were almost there, but Hexdrinker. Hexdrinker and Tarmogoyf and Liliana all working in tandem to stall the game, grind them out of resources, and Hexdrinker, of course, punching through the lines that otherwise we would have needed to have drawn some specific stuff to answer, but the mini Progenitus mode of Hexdrinker doing a ton of work here, getting us over the line. Interesting game, complicated game, one or two debatable lines that I took with minor stuff, but in any case, we were able to fade the combo, and we did get there in game one against a very grindy setup of Devoted Druid, Devastation, whatever you want to call it. So let's take a look at how we side against a deck like this. Okay, so here's how I'm siding against a deck like this. So Plague Engineer is just about our best card. A couple of different nice types to name, but Human, of course, is going to kill a lot of their X1s as well as shut off the combo because Vizier is a human. But there are lines where you could name Druid or you could name Birds. You know, there's some things to name for sure. But Plague Man, no matter how you slice it, is definitely one of our very best cards in this matchup. Collective Brutality can take away Chord of Calling, Eladamri's Call. It can kill small stuff. It can even drain cards great. I think we want Liliana's Triumph, just all the forms of spot removal, or non-targeted spot removal, Edict Effect, as the case may be, should be in. We can talk about these three cards, which are all interesting in various ways in a moment, but first we need to see what we have to bring out, and I like siding like this. I like moving about half off of discard because the games get so grindy. You just saw it in game one, how much it comes down to the top deck. At the same time, we do want the efficient early interaction with which discard can be, and discard takes away some of their 2-for-1s on a 1-for-1 basis, right? So I like leaving into Inquisition 1 Thoughtseize. This would be way more skewed toward Thoughtseize if they were on Collected Company, but I haven't seen 4 drops out of them, I don't believe. So we're half in, half out with discard. We take away Unearth. They're probably, just as likely to play Path to Exile as any other form of spot removal. It's a little bit too reactive, might not be the very best. Courser of Kruphix. We do want to retain our ability to grind, but Courser is the most defensive grindy card of all of our grindy cards, and we want the more offensive-oriented ones, right? So Courser, if we're going to trim on a slower threat, Courser is probably what it should be. And I just like cutting one Liliana. She's just a little clunky, especially on the draw. I think that's totally fine. So if we do all that, that leaves us one spot. Nihil Spellbomb can be nice value play, good against Kitchen Finks, might be good against other synergies they have too, good against Eternal Witness. You can't really go wrong with just one Spellbomb. Surgical Extraction, some might be tempted to bring in because this is a combo deck, but you saw even game one how value-oriented they would be, and they're likelier to be even more value-oriented post-side. I don't think we should be playing Surgical, but Ashiok, very, very interesting here because we do have, of course, the ability to shut off stuff like Eladamri's Call and Chord of Calling, and we can get some incidental graveyard hate. It's not as good at hating the graveyard as Spellbomb, simply because we want to have the instant speed reaction to an ETB trigger or a persist trigger, but it's definitely still interesting. So what do we do here? Well, I think if you wanted to get really techie, you could say on the draw we'll play Nihil Spellbomb because we want to be a little bit lower curve on the draw, and on the play we're likelier to ride a big threat to victory, so you could play Ashiok instead of Spellbomb. That's if you want to get super techie. It may just be that one or the other is better, but I said, hey, I've never actually got the chance to use Ashiok against a devoted combo deck, so let's see how it does. So this is how we were sideboarded. Let's take a look at game 2. Alright, so our opponent has gone down to 6 here in game 2 in our hands. Great. Inquisition into Goyf, into Liliana, into hopefully a turn 4 tracker with the 4th land to follow it up, and look at that, we got the 4th land, so our curve is sweet. Let's go ahead and fire off that Inquisition, see what the opponent is up to, and they've got a Scooze and 2 copies of Kitchen Finks, so Definitely a very value-oriented hand, and my first instinct, maybe just from looking at the redundancy and lack thereof, was to take the Scooze, but I was like, you know what? I think we can beat a Scooze. I think the thing that could overrun, like, our Liliana plan, even with Tireless Tracker involved, is them, like, maybe finding a piece of spot removal or something, and then just going on the double Kitchen Finks plan. So I did decide to take a Kitchen Finks, even though we don't have removal this turn for the Ooze. I think that's hopefully going to be fine, but we'll see. Definitely an interesting call, and the opponent will indeed run out the Scooze. So we draw another Goyf. It's actually kind of a bad draw because we just kind of want more interaction, and the Goyfs, if the game goes long enough, could actually get hamstrung pretty badly by a Scooze, but we'll see how it all goes. We cannot take this block because the opponent can shrink our Goyf to the point where it'd be a chump block, so we just take the hit. And then the opponent goes Kitchen Finks, as expected. 2 unknowns in hand, back to us, and our Liliana Edict does look a lot worse right now. We draw a Plague Engineer, that's actually pretty sweet, but what do we do here? Well, I think it's actually still the Liliana plan. We might not be able to protect her, this just might be a way to eat through half of a Finks, but this does give us the upside of naming Ouphe with Plague Engineer and it being a reasonable thing to do. So we'll see if we have the luxury of doing that. I don't think any other play was great. I think we don't want to expose Tracker to potential removal before we get the value. And, playing another Tarmogoyf just felt too mana inefficient and not impactful enough. So once again, our Goyf is kind of just a bystander here as their Scooze finishes off our Liliana, and they find another Scooze. And another land. So 1 unknown in hand, we draw Fatal Push. Pretty interesting draw. So this is a good window for the Plague Man, but it's an even better window to go Tireless Tracker. And make at least 1 clue. I did decide to go ahead and fetch main phase, just wagering that they're likely enough to not have removal in hand that I just want my guaranteed value. This does betray that we have a Fatal Push, though, basically because we fetch and shock. And I think it's correct, simply because we need more... we do need black to hold up our push, and we need more green as well on the board. So that is what it is. Not much we can do differently besides playing more reactively with Tracker and risking not getting the second clue if they find removal for a turn. Opponent will shock in land number 5, which obviously shows they've got something really interesting going on. They're going to attack with the Kitchen Finks, and you know what? We're just going to say no. We're just going to say no blocks for you. Blocking, of course, is a trade with Tireless Tracker, and would not end well with the Goyf trying to block it because of those Scooze activations. Opponent will crack the Horizon Canopy and then play a Hexdrinker. So, definitely happy we did not spend the Fatal Push yet. We're just going to go ahead and push the Scavenging Ooze and untap. Now, we're also happy we didn't name Ouphe yet with the Plague Man, because even though that's a good way to trade with the Finks at parity, we've just got to get rid of that Hexdrinker. We saw what it did for us in Game 1. We don't want them to have that same luxury here in Game 2. So Plague Man naming Snake is going to say, see you later. We've got more gas in hand, which is nice, but this was a very clunky turn overall. We are not holding up anything right now. We didn't get to crack a clue. We didn't get to make more clues. We've got a couple of 2-drops rotting in hand, and they're of questionable long-term value against this Scooze, right? So we take our kind of free attack with the Goyf while we can, but beyond that, we're just kind of hoping they don't top deck much. They have Dryad Arbor and Vizier of Remedies. So Vizier is obviously annoying alongside Finks, and they're going wide with the Arbor, but it's nothing too crazy yet. But we are down to 8, so definitely a really interesting grindy game. And we draw a Painless Land. That's a pretty good draw. Pretty good draw, not going to lie. And we'll just begin by cracking a clue. Remember that Field of Ruin can tag Dryad Arbor, so that is definitely interesting. And with that in mind, and with the same concept of Goyf and Confidant not being the very best at this particular juncture against Scooze, and with us on the back foot, we are just simply going to say go. We're bluffing, we're holding up a clue. We can conceivably crack clue into push if we desperately need to this upcoming turn. Or we can just field and make more clues, or we can just crack more clues. We will have to see. But the opponent's continuing to rip gas. They're ripping good value plays like Kitchen Finks. And they're going to pass, so we're just going to crack a clue. We're looking for more cards here. No need to activate field quite yet. And we draw Collective Brutality, so drawing Assassin's Trophy followed by Brutality, this is the type of stuff we're going to need to start seeing. Pretty nice. But we're going to say, all right, let's go ahead and see if we can hit anything else off the tracker. A better land to play? Not really, so we just play out the field. And then, it is Collective Brutality time. I like doing it this way. So I like killing the Vizier, which is going to make the Finks worse, and of course, make the combo that much further from going off. And Dark Confidant, it does not seem like we're going to be in a place to play him profitably anytime soon. We're trying to take this game really, really long. Our life total is low, and I'd rather just drain for 2. And then once again, we're going to play cautiously here. We're not gaining that much by playing a Goyf. We would much rather hold up Trophy in case, and also just hold up Clue. This is the beauty of Tireless Tracker while continuing to make land drops, is we can play reactively and not have wasted even part of a turn for doing so. Opponent finds a Birds, no big deal. We're cracking more clues on the end step. And we are finding another Dark Confidant and a Plague Engineer. So Plague Man's a pretty good find. Let's make our clue. Let's crack a clue. It's all very, very good. Or excuse me, instead of cracking a clue, we're going to go ahead and make another clue by fielding away the Dryad Arbor, so we're starting to chip away even more heavily at the board, making another clue along the way. Feels good, man, and there's no need to commit the Plague Man just yet, so this time we're going to finally play out another Tarmogoyf. And once again, we get to pass the turn holding up clue, holding up trophy. It's all very nice. And there's no need to get too aggressive yet with the tracker, because they still have some pretty decent blocks. And we have the inevitability right now, and we have the ability to interact with any potential combo. Opponent rips a land off the top. That's excellent for us. This is where I feel we're starting to really have the near deterministic win. But if we keep drawing cards like Thoughtseize, maybe not. Assassin's Trophy, that is more like it. So now, my friends, now if you do the math, you'll know that we actually have the ability to go for the throat here. We might not quite get the win, but we've got a really good turn. So I'll show you what we did. We're going to begin by trophying the Skoos. That's the first action to take because it just gives them less information, less things to eat in the graveyard, so on and so forth. And it makes them also decide whether or not to tap the birds to get value here, which could become relevant. And they do, so sure, fair enough. We trophy away the Skoos, and then we've got another trophy for the unpersisted Kitchen Finks, which I remember the opponent pausing on this and being like, okay, they must have thought that's a pretty weird thing to do, but it will become all too obvious in the next sequence here why we did, because it's time for the Plague Man. It's time to come down and say, oofs are no longer welcome here, see ya nerds, and now all of a sudden, our Goyfs are big, our tracker has quietly become an 8-7 over the last few turns, and we get to smash in for a solid 16 points of damage, while clearing out their entire board except a Birds of Paradise. Opponent will untap, and that's going to do it. So, wow, that was a really interesting kind of holding pattern that we found ourselves in. Very different from Game 1 in that both players were more flush with resources, but Tireless Tracker is what won us this game, no question about it. Plague Engineer was actually really important to killing the snake on curve before they got to make it a 4-4, and then finishing off the Ouphes here and allowing us to just about alpha strike them for the win. So you've got to come prepared to grind, my friends, against this deck. They are main decking lots of value permanents. They're only going to get grindier post side, and you have to be wary for them comboing you out of nowhere. So it's always a really fun, in my opinion, skill testing matchup for sure, but we did get there. A nice, powerful display with the deck. We kind of got wrecked round 1. We kind of scraped it out game 2, but now the deck is hitting its stride. We run over Devoted Combo, excuse me. That's going to be a hard habit to break. Couple times in a row for the 2-1 position in the league. Hope you're enjoying this, my friends, and let's go check out round 4. Winning the die rolls a lot, my friends, and no exception here. I think we lost at round 1, and we've won it ever since, and this is a risky keep. I'll be the first one to admit it, but look, we find any third land at all, and not only can we fix our mana with Field of Ruin, we can also have a pretty efficient turn of going Field into Push or Field into Hexdrinker, and we have 2 of our most desirable cards in the opener, assuming that we do get stuck on black for a little bit, at least we have those, and if we get a green source from anywhere, we are off to the races. It's just one of those lands and spells hands you don't like to mulligan in game 1s, and we see the opponent is on some kind of a shadow deck. We've got Mishra's Bauble, and we've got Monomorphose, but what else? Street Wraith, so lots of cantrips, Shadow itself, and 2 discard spells. Well, now, I don't feel so bad, excuse me, don't feel so bad about having potentially dead cards in hand, because of course we cannot necessarily cast them all right away, so we just go ahead and take the Shadow, knowing that if we don't, they're going to take away our push, and then we're going to be scrambling for more removal. So, back to the opponent here, and they're going to lead on Bauble. Blood Crypt into Inquisition. Down goes Scavenging Ooze. Fair enough. Back to us, and we will draw a Verdant Catacombs, green land, right off the top. Never didn't have it. Rewarded for the risky keep. And, really interesting call as to whether we go Hexdrinker or Tarmogoyf here, but I chose Hexdrinker, and this is why. So, starting the clock with Tarmogoyf is all well and good, but we don't necessarily want to do that before we have more information. That could play into their hands a little bit. So, by going Hexdrinker level up, we give ourselves the option to put the Hexdrinker out of range of most, if not all, of their Game 1 interaction next turn. So we're kind of forcing them to find a Fatal Push or something else right now. And to that end, they start cantripping like crazy. They go Crack Bauble, cycle Street Wraith, make a second land drop, and then they're going to cast Monomorpho, so they're still on the dig, making double black, and they're going to Thoughtseize us, taking away Goyf, and Inquisition us, taking away Push. So quite the turn from the opponent. A lot of spells cast, a lot of actions taken, but Hexdrinker has survived all of that. So that's why we did that last turn. We are rewarded for it. We draw Dark Confidant. Definitely a card that I would be very happy to play under most circumstances, but we've come this far. We are now priced into making sure the Hexdrinker does not die to Push or Bolt or whatever else they could have, right? So back to the opponent, and I also believe with us having the potential to go untapped land into making Hexdrinker level 8 next turn rather, I think it's correct to start attacking. We're now making them find a Shadow to punish us for that, and even then we might still be able to win the race. So opponent will lead off on Monomorphose, filtering into green. They do have a Shadow, and they have a Verdant Catacombs. Very interesting, so they could potentially have had another play to make, but they would needed to crack the fetch land, and then that would have put them in range of us going land. Hexdrinker level 8, you're dead. So Hexdrinker potentially slowing them down, preventing them from making another play that turn. Unfortunately, we do rip a land that does not happen to be an untapped land, so instead we're just going to go wide, we're going to play the Bob, we're going to put a level on, and we're going to say go. So, back to the opponent, they're just going to draw, they're going to pass. We draw Kalitas. Alright, Kalitas, very, very interesting. So, what do we do here? Well, unfortunately, we cannot quite present lethal this turn because they're just not going to crack that fetch land. And then what happens on the crack back? Who knows? So it's definitely a really intriguing call. But here's what we decided to do. We just decided, even though it's not that mana efficient, we're going to play the Tarmogoyf, and we are going to just put 2 more levels on the Hexdrinker to be mana efficient in light of our initial mana inefficient play. And we do that simply because Goyf is a big old 5/6. It's going to line up better against some of their things, not Shadow, but other threats they might have, than Kalitas will at this stage of the game. And notably, Bob plus Goyf equals lethal, even if they manage to somehow block Hexdrinker or deal with it this turn quite before it has protection. Opponent's going to attack with the Death Shadow, and then they are going to Monomorphose during attacks. kind of an interesting way to sequence that, but in any case, whatever they found is not sufficient, so they are just going to scoop it up, not making us decide whether to block in case of Temur Battle Rage or something like that. So it's really interesting, but in any case, Hexdrinker was the thing that really got us there. Going wide with Bob, going wide with Goyf, that was all very helpful, and our early interaction was good, for sure, but Hexdrinker is what broke the mirror here. Hexdrinker is what they could not handle game one. So we didn't see any green spells out of their deck, but we did see them filter into green a couple times and play a Verdant Catacombs. So we assume they're on some kind of a Jund build. Jund Shadow with probably a Traverse sub-theme. If they're on Jund colors and they're on Bauble, I think we can conclude that. So how do we sideboard against them? Let's find out. Alright, my friends, so against Jund Traverse Shadow, some interesting sideboarding protocols to talk about. First, I'll say that these 6 cards should all pretty much be in my opinion. We've got Spellbomb to be a value-oriented way to mess up with their Delirium and other graveyard effects. Nissa Vital Force, just a classic mid-range mirror-breaking grindy card. Plague Engineer, great upside, and Death Touch to trade off with Shadow. And Liliana's Triumph, very good against their mid-range deck in general with a 2-for-1 potential. No arguments there. Now, Fulminator Mage is actually a really interesting play against a deck like this that does tend to operate on a lower land count. But against any variant of Shadow, against all the variants of Shadow, Fulminator seems the best to me against Grixis, and it seems a little bit more medium against the other ones, and they, remember, are in Jund colors, so we do not know whether they're going to be on Wrenn and 6, but Wrenn and 6 is a good reason not to play Fulminator. Then, of course, Ashiok Dream Render, very, very interesting. Remember how I said I didn't like our Jund opponent siding in against us in Game 1? Because we didn't show them that third dimension beyond hosing the occasional fetch and messing up the graveyards that we're not that dependent on as long as their graveyard's still around. Well, we've got the third dimension here. We've got them on probably the Delirium sub-theme in some way, shape, or form, whether it be Grimflayer or Traverse the Uvenwald or something like that. So Ashiok is definitely in contention, and you could consider Fulminator too, but what do we think can come out? Well, no surprise, Urborg is the land to cut. Collective Brutality is pretty poor, and so is Discard in general. Now, I don't mind leaving in a discard spell or two, especially on the draw. So what I think I would do here is just say, alright, we're on the draw, Fulminator is less impactful on the draw anyway. And we don't know if they're on Wrenn and 6, so let's see if we can figure that out. We're going to bring in Ashiok, though. Ashiok's got a lot of upsides, but I think this is a very viable card when it's replacing one of these. So let's go ahead and just leave in a lone Thoughtseize, and we'll take out these 7, we'll bring in these 7, and then if they do manage to take us to Game 3, we can revisit whether we need a little more discard or whether we just cut the last piece of discard, whether we want to go all in on Fulminator now that we're on the play, whether we want to take Ashiok back out. Those are all interesting questions. We might not really need 4 Plague Engineer either, so you could side a few different ways, but for what we've seen, and for Game 2 on the draw, I would be sided just like this. Alright, my friends, we got a nice one. 3 lands, lots of interaction, Kalitas for the top end. We don't have an early threat, and in these Shadow matchups, that is okay. It is all about just having removal, just trading off resources. It's totally fine. So the opponent will Thoughtseize us. Interestingly, they do take Kalitas. It makes sense in some ways. It's the redundant piece of the hand, but I kind of expected them anyway to start chewing away at our spot removal. But in any case, Treetop Village, well, that's a fine draw. We'll run it out. There's our 4th land for any reason we might need it. Just a good value card in the matchup in general. Opponent is using Peatland and Thoughtseize together to great effect to reduce their own life total, and now we lose our Fatal Push. So, we promptly draw another removal spell to replace it, and Trophy is such a high value card in the matchup. It's one that we really, really like to see. It's just another reason not to play Fulminator, basically. Now, granted, you might tax them out of basics relatively soon, but still, it's just another reason I'm happy with the way we sided, right? Opponent goes Tarmogoyf, fetch land, and they're going to pass. So we could untap and we could pulse the Goyf, and that's actually kind of tempting just because that lets us hold up trophies. But if we draw a Liliana, specifically, we are going to really regret not trophying. Plus, they already know about the trophy. They already know about the pulse. You know, I think it's fine here to just simply trophy. Don't foresee it being a bad decision. So we go ahead and trophy on the end step. And then it's back to us, and we draw Nurturing Peatland. It's kind of a good draw, actually. It lets us just keep curving out. We've got the late game redraws available to us, and we're just holding up trophy this turn. Opponent goes Tireless Tracker, which is a scary one until they fetch. So they don't have a land to play from hand. Therefore, we are so happy we drew the second trophy, and we're so happy the opponent didn't start taking away removal with their first discard spell. So if the opponent had played a fetch land out of hand first, we would be all of a sudden in deep trouble. That's how swingy Tracker can be in these matchups. The opponent then plays a Stomping Ground out of hand, so a little bit of missequencing from the opponent there, I would say, but maybe they just had a mental shortcut and assumed, oh, the trophy's out of their hand, they don't have anything else. But I think you've got to play as though we do, right? In any case, they will traverse for a good old shadow, and it's back to us. Plague Engineer is something we could just run out, naming whatever, but I'd rather crack the Peatland, look for something more proactive to do. We do have one Thoughtseize that we're drawing toward, but to take away that shadow, but instead we hit a 2-drop, which is fine. Scooz could die here, but we'll just run it out. Just running out our spells. Of course, we don't want them to have, like, Liliana into land into shadow or something, but they have another traverse, so they go get a Tarmogoyf, and that's good play from them because they're not walking into the Maelstrom Pulse that they know about by getting another shadow, right? So they're just going to go on the run out their threats plan, too. It's kind of what these games boil down to a lot of the time. We draw another Scooz. Yeah, that's okay. Starting to get a little clunky here. We're ironically gated by mana despite having a lot of lands because we've cracked a Peatland and all that, but we'll pulse away a shadow and we will pass holding up Scooz. Opponent will attack. Now, we could shrink the Goyf by 1 by eating a bauble, but we're paying a life to do that. You know, I don't think that's great. I think we're just going to pass and then see if we can blow them out in some way or just, you know, make one of their plays worse, basically, by holding up the effect instead. Opponent will crack Peatland, and then they're going to cast another Traverse, and now this is our cue to eat the bauble. And I don't know if the opponent just kind of wanted to make us see that line or whether they didn't know that's how it worked, but before the spell resolves, we eat the bauble. Then the opponent does not have Delirium, so instead of tutoring a creature, they are searching for a basic land, but of course they failed to find. They have already failed to find off a trophy, so they failed to find off of that Traverse, and that's a massive blowout in our favor. We don't have the game locked up or anything, but that was a really, really nice piece of value. So let's go ahead and attack with the Scooz, see what the opponent's got. Unfortunately, we're just kind of drawing more threats, and it's all a bit clunky, but in spirit of the game getting down to brass tacks with us both at low life totals, I think it's just correct to go as wide as possible here. None of our threats is very good on its own, but here's another example of the upside of Hexdrinker, is you can just make it a Savannah Lions when you are otherwise kind of stuck with things to do with your mana, and when you otherwise just want to go wide to end the game. So we've got Plague Man naming Goyf. Similar principle to what we did against Xund in Game 1. It's just kind of what we know they have. We're probably not going to hose anything outright, so we'll just shrink a Goyf. And then we see the downside of Hexdrinker. It dies to the Renin 6. They are on Renin 6, so our sideboarding plan is validated. That's pretty rough, though, that they're able to ping Hexy. And we draw Blooming Marsh, not particularly good. So what do we do here? Well, here's what we do. We attack them with both. We're just going to ignore the Renin 6. Yes, it's good value, but the game is close enough to being over that I think we just want to try to end it. We could also fire up Treetop Village, but if we do, that's actually not a good attack into Goyf, and it makes Scooz not a good attacker either. But if we're just attacking with all of our mana open, Scooz is going to be able to kill the Goyf in combat. Opponent will assign the block anyway. I guess they have no choice. But you know, we'll see what they have. We'll eat 2 creatures, which is enough to outsize the Goyf. Then the opponent's going to bauble, sure, but we just get to eat yet another creature, which is better value than eating the bauble because it's good against other effects and it gains us a life and all that stuff. And then Goyf just dies. So, sure, yeah, makes sense, I suppose. And it proved to be a really good attack, so we just simply play the Marsh. We even get to hold up a Scooze activation, and we'll pass. Opponent, of course, facing lethal on board. We'll see what they can manage to deploy. It's going to be a Monomorphose making black and green. And then the opponent chatted us and said, oops. Because if you notice, they did that in their own upkeep. So definitely a punt from the opponent. Who knows whether they would have been able to stabilize. I do like our odds from here. We're drawing live, of course. We've got a really good configuration post side. We've got the redraw with Peatland. Even if they can block or kill the Scooze, Treetop plus Plague Man connecting is good. Scavenging Ooze coming down is good. The opponent's gated on mana. I don't see them beating us anyway, but with them monomorphosing in their own upkeep, they're definitely not going to beat us on 1 mana this turn. So definitely an unfortunate misclick or misread of what phase they were in by our opponent, but hey, I think we had him anyway, and this was a dominating display here against Jund, Traverse, Shadow. So as mentioned, my friends, our deck was sputtering a little bit at the start. We got out top decked hard by Jund Midrange, but now we're hitting the gas pedal. We have been cruising through 5 straight victories, and we are now 3-1 in the league, playing for the 4-1. Let's see how we do. Okay, we continue to win the die roll, and our opening hands continue to be perfectly functional. None of them are perfect. Like, we're not usually seeing like Inquisition, Tarmogoyf, or Bob into Liliana. Those are the perfect hands. But we are seeing 4 spells, 3 lands, good functional progressions with 1 piece of discard. We've been seeing that ever since we started winning in the league. That's the winning formula, so we'll keep it. The opponent goes down to 6 as well. The opponent starting to mulligan in the latter half of this league as well doesn't hurt. We go Blooming Marsh, Thoughtseize, and it's Burn. Well, in the Hogak summer, it would feel weird if you played a full league without running into Hogak, and now these days it seems it's weird if you play a full league without running into Burn. But we're not in danger of that. We run into Burn here in round 5. So what do? The opponent on a 1-lander, they have 3 creatures, notably a full repertoire of 3 creatures, and a Lightning Bolt and a Rift Bolt. Well, we have a Tarmogoyf. We have a Tarmogoyf coming down turn 2 on the play. Therefore, we are very well positioned against creatures. We're just going to take away their Lightning Bolt. This is going to put us in a position where the Goyf can be absolutely excellent, and we'll see how it goes for us. But opponent, of course, goes Goblin Guide for the max damage right out of the gates, and will he be so kind as to find us a land? He will not, but there's the Liliana we've been crying out for. And of course we knew unless the opponent top-decked an Inspiring Vantage, they would be growing the Goyf for us by cracking Arid Mazes. So we should be pretty safe to not have to just play the Goyf here and not worry about it. Next turn we can go Push, we can go Liliana, whatever seems best. So opponent does hit their second land. That's very good for them, but their best play here is to just apparently play out the Swifties, set up for next turn, and that's also fine with us. We draw Inquisition. What a beautiful, beautiful draw. So, of course, the clear play now becomes Inquisition, and we see Eidolon of the Great Revel, Rift Bolt. There's actually an argument that we can play around the Eidolon reasonably well here if we go on the Liliana plan next turn, but I still think it's just better to take it. We can beat a Rift Bolt plus their top deck almost certainly with our massive Goyf into Liliana next turn. We also get to deploy the Overgrown Tomb untapped, so I do like that. You know, the opponent could run really hot, though. We do run the risk of that. They could run really hot, but if they run really hot, we're probably not beating the Eidolon anyway, right? So, opponent will suspend that Rift Bolt, and will they try to get any attacks in? They will not. So, we could just pass, but I think for the sake of mana efficiency, we are supposed to Fatal Push, and we're going to push Swifty, because Swifty is the thing that could eventually tangle with the Goyf a little more efficiently. You could somehow, in some way, 2-for-1, spending a burn spell on it and getting a bunch of prowess triggers to get rid of the Goyf. And, of course, Goblin Guide can give us more lands, right? So we draw a Fatal Push. What does that mean? Well, that, my friends, means we're not going to risk them just drawing straight gas off the top and burning us out while we play defensively. We are going to race them because Goyf is gigantic. So we go ahead and race. and then we are going to play the Liliana and Edict with them on such a low, so low on resources. We're unlikely to really wreck them with Liliana +1, so I'm very happy just using her as an Edict, and, either they have to redirect a little bit of damage to her, or maybe she will get a little something out of their hand and get repeated activations. Who knows? Either way, Goblin Guide comes across, Rift Bolt resolves, they're just racing us as they should. Then they found a Lava Spike. Okay, so we're down to 8. And they found another Lava Spike. This is what I mean about them drawing hot. It's a little scary. It's all a little bit frightening. But, note, Sunbaked Canyon, amazing card against us, but as has happened a couple of times in this league, an activation of something like this, our effect land, puts the opponent down to a 2-turn clock as opposed to a 3-turn clock. So we'll just tick Liliana up because there's no reason not to. Bob is a free pitch. And we're holding up Fatal Push here, and the opponent is just dead because it's game 1. They've got no way to do 5 damage to us with 1 spell. And they don't have a path game 1 for the Goyf, or Rest in Peace or anything like that. So we push for the Goblin Guide. After it attacks, nets us a Peatland, pretty cool value. And then the opponent will suspend another Rift Bolt, but that's just going to do it. Tarmogoyf is going to smack him for 5, and that is that. So Tarmogoyf, what a guy. What a magic card. Absolutely awesome. Our discard came at the right time. Obviously, Thoughtseize isn't ideal, but it was still pretty good turn 1. Drawing Inquisition on turn 3 was sweet, because that let us have the turn of Inquisition into Fatal Push into playing this land tapped. And granted, we would not have been dead to the Rift Bolt even if we had to shock in, because they couldn't hardcast it. But we would have been dead to a lot of other things if we'd had to shock in this tomb at some point, but we didn't, so we got there relatively comfortably in the end, despite how low our life total was. So always feels great to take game 1 off of Burn, my friends, because that means we only need to win 1 of the post-side games. Alright, so you know the drill against Boros Burn, or do you? Well, it depends on the configuration, and we've actually got some less obvious decisions to make with this one. So obviously, Confidants and Thoughtseizes, we're going to say see you later to those, and Collective Brutality is our best card. That'll come in. But then we actually have 7 potential other cards for 5 slots, and it's questionable as to which ones are best. So we have Plague Engineer. The debuff is marginally relevant, but it is mostly just another 2/2 body that maybe gains you a life if you're racing a creature. Or 2 life, whatever the case may be, however many activations, or however many hits they get across, if our Plague Man is tapped, trading back, basically, right? Fulminator Mage is yet another 2/2 for 3, not very impressive, but does have the upside of being able to Stone Rain away a Canopy Land, or even Stone Rain them off of a splash color. And finally, how do we rate Liliana's Triumph? Well, it's just kind of another removal spell. Removing any creature is pretty good against them. It's all about equally good. It's not they have anything totally expendable. And the instant speed discard, if we have a Liliana active, could catch them out, could become very relevant against like them top decking a Canopy Land or a sorcery speed piece of action while hellbent. So what do we do? This is actually a little bit more tricky than our usual configuration for Burn. Well, here's what I did. I kind of followed the same principle of, when in doubt, let's leave Fulminator out on the draw, because we're just way less likely to get them with Fulminator on the draw. So we'll still bring in 1 because it's better than other options. I even considered just playing a literal Grizzly Bear, 2/2 Collector Ouphe, but didn't go that far. I'd still rather have the Grey Ogre that can kill a Canopy Land. But yeah, I think on the draw, when we're less likely to cheese them out with Fulminator, we could side like this. And then, if you want to bring them both back on the play, again, we don't need 4 Plague Engineer in this matchup. Maybe just 2 is fine, or maybe we decide Liliana's Triumph isn't where we want to be. But I think this card's fine in the matchup, so I would probably leave the Fulminators out, 2 of them out on the draw, and then leave 2 Plague Men out on the play. Alright, my friends, so our hands have been fairly kind to us this league, but this is not one of them. It's a no-lander 7. We mullet. The opponent is doing fine over there, but we're not so much. What do we do with this hand? We have a very, very unplayable hand as well. But remember, we are on the draw. On the draw against Burn, I just don't feel able to beat them with my list going to 5. Because one of our very best cards is Collective Brutality, but even Collective Brutality is kind of not that great when you've mulled that deep. So, if we keep, we're going to bottom a Plague Engineer. We are all in on drawing a black land. We don't draw a black land, the hand doesn't function. But if we do, we've got kind of 2 chances to draw it before it becomes disastrous. Then the hand is actually a quite reasonable mulligan to 6, with 2 Fatal Pushes, as well as the Collective Brutality. So I decided for the high risk, high reward, keep here. And on the play, it might be pretty loose to keep this. But on the draw, again, I don't see us winning against Burn really at all on the draw mulling to 5. But the opponent has mulliganed to 6 as well. That could work to our advantage, of course. And they're going to go turn 1, suspend a Rift Bolt, and boom. Twice we've had a risky keep this league. Twice we rip the land we need off the top. Would this be better as a Blooming Marsh? Yes. Will I complain? Absolutely not. Hissing Quagmire, you are just fine with me. His cards have been great this league, actually. Much maligned card, and yes, other color pairings do it better, but hey, the Quagmire has putting in a shift for us lately, so we'll take it, and the opponent will find a Swift Spear, and then they will bolt us, so it's a nice, healthy chunk of damage, but that's all right with us because we get to resolve our Collective Brutality and they won't get to blow it out with an instant speed play of some kind. So what do we pitch here? Very interesting. I just decided to kind of split the difference. I think keeping around just 1 Fatal Push is fine since we're going to kill their only creature right now and since we're drawing toward a lot more removal. I also think pitching 1 Plague Engineer is totally fine because we cannot even cast the other one we have and it's a little underwhelming anyway. I think we clearly have to keep 1 Hexdrinker, clearly have to keep 1 Fatal Push, and I guess I'd rather keep the first Plague Man over the second push. But interesting call. But either way, we're resolving the escalated brutality. All 3 modes, gotta love it. We see Lightning Helix and Skullcrack. Pretty clear take of Helix in my opinion, because we don't have any other life gain imminent. We're probably going to force that Skullcrack out of their hand one way or the other soon enough, and we just are better able to race the Skullcrack than the Helix. We draw Tarmogoyf, that's a really good draw. Speaking of racing, that's a really good draw. It's going to make any creatures they're drawing from here on out pretty bad, and of course it's going to let us race them. So, Riftbolt comes off suspend, they're going to pass with 1 unknown in hand, still only on 2 land. We draw Kalitas. Well, great card in the matchup, but not when we're stuck on 2 land. But once again, not complaining, because we did hit the second land that we needed to function. So, Goyf's going to get busy, smack him for 4, and then it is Hexdrinker time. We just have to race. We play our Savannah Lions, we put a counter down, and we say, all right, opponent, what do you have? They have a Boros Charm. That's very frightening. We are now dead to another Boros Charm plus that Skullcrack. So we draw Liliana's Triumph. So we're seeing some sideboard tech. Interesting stuff. But you know what? We're all in, baby. We're all in on the Snake and the Goyf. Name a more iconic duo. All right? Tarmogoyf and Hexdrinker. They're going to smash in. 8 damage to the face. And now the opponent, once again, kind of has to have that Boros Charm into Skullcrack sequence, or they have to have Skullcrack here and a 1-mana burn spell in hand and then rip another 1-mana burn spell. Or a haste threat. So, lots that they could have, but lots that they could not have. Skullcrack is the play, they'll untap. We are crossing our fingers, and we're rewarded. The fingers become uncrossed, we don't need them anymore because we see the game has ended. That's the most beautiful message on this platform a lot of the time, so feels great to get Burn 2-0. I've been seeing a ton of Burn lately. I've been seeing Burn when I'm playing the 3-color decks, and it's a lot tougher there. And in my last Rock League, we just got pretty unlucky against Burn. I believe we saw it 3 times, and we beat them twice, so it's fine. But they were closer than they needed to be in the wins, and we got blown out hard in the losses. We just were getting on the wrong side of variance, so feels really good to kind of cleanly take down Burn 2-0. Again, they could have had us here. They probably did have us to 1, at least, in all honesty, but we got there. We got there, my friends, and after an absolute pasting round 1, and then a close and sketchy win game 2, we just start coasting through this league, 2-0, 2-0, 2-0 to finish 4-1. The Rock is still awesome. despite Stoneblade being a thing now, despite Jund having Renin 6, the Rock is still really good. And this was actually my first league back on the Rock since the last one you saw. So, first time picking it back up, and boom, we hit the 4-1. So, good times. Let's do a little quick wrap-up here. Alright, my friends, so that was a nice league. We didn't get to cast Liliana's Triumph. We still didn't get Ashiok. This War of the Spark tech, it's just like it just never shows up when I put it in my 75. First time I play Courser of Kruphix, I see it like 5 times, but, I've got these cards. Probably played 10 leagues each at least on this channel with these 2 cards in the sideboard. Just never really cast them, so I don't know what that tells us, but just kind of weird. But anyway, we did see a lot of good stuff. We didn't see Courser this time. Kalitas didn't get to do anything too crazy, but good old Tarmogoyf. Just our best card. It really is just our best card. Tarmogoyf and Liliana. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The core of this deck is really good, really strong, really well positioned, but and our interaction was great too. Discard was huge this game. We had some good fatal pushes, some good catch-all removal as well, especially against Shadow. But who I think the star of the show was our valiant little snake, the one of Hexdrinker. Now, we saw Hexdrinker valiantly die as a Savannah Lions that's been color shifted to green to a Renin 6 ping. We also saw it bite the dust against Lightning Bolt, I believe, and Harnessed Lightning, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering correctly. But look, the fact that they're spending removal on our 1-drop before we've invested much mana into it, with the exception of losing it to Renin 6, which does just suck, is absolutely awesome. I shouldn't say it's absolutely awesome, but it's acceptable. It's fine. It's a decent trade. And then we saw it get to a 4-4 against Burn and Race alongside Tarmogoyf, neck and neck with the Goyf outracing Burn. We saw it get to an 8-8 and break through an unbreakable board stall against Kitchen Finks and Vizier of Remedies against the Devoted combo deck. So, Hexdrinker, whether it's going wide as a Savannah Lions, we also saw it just start the clock early in the combo matchup in round 2, right? So whether it's going wide, whether it's drawing removal, whether it's just becoming a nice, efficient 4-4 because we used our mana sinks judiciously, a little here, a little there, or whether it is just the one thing the opponent cannot answer, Hexdrinker definitely has been having some good moments and some bad moments. It's a high variance card. It just is what it is. It might be optimal as a 1-of, but I could see myself on the back of this and other performances going back to 2-of as well. But I mean, Tireless Tracker was amazing here. Courser of Kruphix is one that I'm continuing to test. It might not make the final cut. And of course, we have Questing Beast coming. So guys, the takeaway here, I think, is that our creatures are awesome. And our Planeswalkers are not as well positioned as they once were, with the 1000% notable exception of Liliana of the Veil. She is just as good as it gets for us, but I'm talking about Last Hope, Vraska Golgari Queen, stuff like that. I'm just not as high on them. They don't feel as impactful in the meta right now as they did in the pre-Hogak meta, where we had a lot more shadow decks running around before Jund had Renin 6, when there was a higher control presence. I liked those cards more in those situations. When humans were around more, Last Hope, Vraska, all that stuff felt great. Right now, guys, I'm more inclined to keep trying this Ashiok, even though I never seem to see it. Maybe keep Nissa in just as a massive mirror breaker, but even Nissa, I think, will be making way for the Questing Beast once Beast is out, and just leaning heavily on our creatures for our value and for our proactive ways to win the game. Tracker's looking awesome. Hexdrinker looking awesome. Tarmogoyf looking awesome. Skooz looking awesome. Dark Confidant has not been shining as much, but we all know how good it can be in the right matchups. I think still playing 3 is correct. You don't need to get me started ranting about Plague Man. We all know how much I love the Plague Man, and Kalitas has been great, Questing Beast has been great, so the takeaway is that Hexdrinker is sweet, and so are all of our other creatures. I think we should just be not playing too many creatures at the expense of interaction, but playing creatures in place of other value-oriented slots on average, all else being equal. That's where my head's at, but of course you'll have to let me know. But in any case, speaking of let me know what you thought as always about the lines, about the sideboarding, all that good stuff. It was a tricky league in places. It was a tough league to stay optimistic about after the first 3 or so games. And round 2 also, even after winning a game, looked like it was well lost a couple different times. But you know what? We scraped that one out. And then from there, the deck really looked strong and felt strong. We love when Rock feels this way. It's just a clean, 2-colored killing machine. Interaction, clock, you gotta love it. So thank you once again to Kyle Peterson and Raja Burrows and all other Patreon supporters. Stay tuned to the channel because next up, having taken your feedback into account from the deck tech, I will be playing Orzhov Stoneblade. We might have a donation league or two in the near future as well. We'll continue covering Eldraine spoilers. You know where to come for all that stuff. It is right here. So thanks again. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Hope you have a great day.